Welcome to this YouTube exclusive extra from episode 5 at Brewery Ommegang. Our trip here was incredible, and Justin Forsyth and Matt White took us on a tour through the whole facility. If you haven't seen the episode yet, make sure you go watch that before you watch this video. So let's get into this YouTube exclusive. Here's our tour through Brewery Ommegang.
This is really the first thing you're going to see as you're coming down the road. You finally make it out into the middle of nowhere, all the way to Ommegang. And you see this awesome rock sculpture here. We've got a couple seats here you can relax on. Everybody loves to pull in, take a picture. As we start to pan out here, you'll see the whole brew house. So that farmhouse style brewery right there. Right alongside here too, along the driveway, we were doing a hop growing program with Cornell University. Just trying to figure out what, as New York hops, farmers were trying to reinvigorate that. You know, like I said, in the late 1800s, New York State was the largest hop growing region in the country. And in the past 7 years, New York farmers have started growing more hops. So we were working with Cornell, trying to figure out what varieties we're gonna grow the best, kind of resist the blight, the downy mildew. Most of what we found was like Cascade, Centennial, a lot of these traditional varieties. And then our program with them ended. So you'll still see some hops. We never dug up the rhizomes, but they're growing up the trees and still growing here.
Yeah, you see quite a bit, taking up almost the entirety of that tree trunk.
Yeah, and
that's cool.
The property itself was chosen because this used to be the Lyons hop farm back in the 1800s. This whole area, this whole property was a 140-acre hop farm back during that time.
So has this only been owned by you guys since '97, or was it kind of dating back?
Just since 1997.
Basically, to the right is the brew house, the Lagering hall, cellar, and then across the archway to the left is the packaging hall. Packaging hall, we've definitely built onto quite a bit. We expanded our bottling line about 9 years ago when I first came here, and then we also recently got a canning line. And of course, we're kegging in there as well. Upstairs is our office space, so all the suits. They're cool though. And then out to the left, we got our warehouse, so we're doing all our bottle conditioning out there. That bottle conditioning process, like I said, when you bottle condition in the bright tank, we're adding a little bit more yeast, a little bit more sugar, and then packaging that beer in the bottles, cork and cage typically, sometimes 12 ounce with a cap. But it goes into the warehouse, bottle conditions for 8 days, re-ferments, your carbonation increases, scavenges that oxygen, so your shelf life is gonna be better. And then we also store all our barrels out there. Our malt handling area, we got the mill over towards the back. Outside we've got 2 bulk malt silos. That's just gonna be our base malt, just a pale 2-row. We have these super sack stations here. Everything's on this conveyor line that runs in a loop. So it's all gonna like come through the conveyor belt, drop into the grist or into the mill, then down into the grist case, and then we're gonna get ready to mash in over in the brew house, which is further up here. So this is the original brew house back in '97. It's a 50-barrel system. We got our mash tun on the right here, lauter tun to the left, brew kettle in the back. Also a cold liquor tank and a hot liquor tank behind those guys. We're running stuff through this PLC from this panel here. So if you get to the brew house, you got your mash tun page, your lauter tun page, brew kettle, setting your temps on your hot liquor and cold liquor tanks. And you know, we start up beginning of the week, mashing in. Once we get that, you know, once the mash is done, we're moving that entire mash to the lauter tun. Lauter tun has that false bottom in it. So that way we're gonna strain the wort into the kettle. At that point, since this mash vessel is empty, we're gonna mash in the next batch. So we start overlapping batches all the time. Before we expanded and created that malt handling area, the mill used to be up here. All that specialty malt used to be up here. There was a lot more heavy lifting because we didn't have the super sack station. Now finally we have our air conditioner installed in here. It gets hot in here, especially in the summertime. Oh, yeah. I mean, by the time you walk up there, it's probably 20, 30 degrees warmer than even just down here. The one really unique aspect of Ommegang is the open fermenter, which you guys can take a peek at. basically like a big stainless steel bathtub. You can pop your head in there, so we can fit
That's crazy.
one brew's worth into that. And the way we used to utilize this was basically to take the first brew of the week, put it in there. As the beer's fermenting, we're using, you know, pretty much, at least for those first brews, an ale yeast. So it's gonna be a top fermenting yeast. If you've seen it, if you've done some home brewing yourself or whatever, like you see the kreuzen come up. So we would harvest that yeast from the top because it's the most vital, the most viable. Pull it off and then utilize that yeast for bottle conditioning later on down the road, where it's, you know, it gets put into, let's say, 3 Philosophers, it's almost 10% alcohol. That's a tough condition for yeast to want to re-ferment in. But this yeast is so active and ready to go that was the key aspect of utilizing this. So we'll come down here to the lagering hall, the cellar. These 3 cylindrical conical tanks were the first 3 fermenters. These can fit 2 batches each. And we had these for years until we had to expand, and then all those tanks, all that stainless you're seeing outside, basically same idea. It's just got the cone at the bottom, a couple valves.
And when you say 2 batches, what are you getting from that?
So it's for 2 batches it would be about 100 barrels. So each barrel is 31 gallons. Come down here, you'll see a centrifuge. So a centrifuge, if you don't know what it is, it's basically just spinning everything at a high rate so that the solids are going to separate out, and then you're left with a pretty bright product. Before that, we would use a diatomaceous earth filter, which just creates this bed of sediment that everything filters through, the solids get locked into. This is way more efficient for us to just run through, and then heads into these 3 bright tanks that we have. Basically, once it's in those bright tanks, it's going to get prepped for packaging side. So we force carbonate, basically throwing CO2 through a stone, which just creates tiny bubbles, and carbonates the beers. If they're bottle conditioned beers, this is where we're going to add that top crop yeast. They're really vital yeasts, as well as a little bit more sugar, so we can get that re-fermentation.
These little fermenters here that you see, these are all innovation fermenters. So anything Beard is cooking up that's going to be a new brew or a pilot or something small batch all goes into these tiny guys. Yeah.
But it's a great way to mimic what's going on with the big tanks because, like I said, they're temperature controlled. Even on the pilot system, when I'm brewing, I'm going through that step mash because I want to mimic what we're going to do when we're essentially jumping from 1 hectoliter to 50 hectoliters. So it's a big jump.
That's a big leap. Yeah.
So the more I can do to mimic the process on the production system with the pilot system, the better off I think we are. Cool. So we'll go in the laboratory. This is really nice. We're lucky, super lucky to have this.
And now I'm in science class.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, we're getting into the sciencey aspect of this tour. This lab it's beautiful. This also got built, I think, in 2011. Kind of the most expensive square footage in Cooperstown, I believe. But right behind you, I mean, this unit's going to be utilized the most. It's the alkalizer made by Anton Parr. So every morning we're checking ballings, we're checking, you know, what the alcohol is on every single tank that's fermenting, see where the sugars are at, all that kind of stuff. So we're pulling samples, we filter it, run it through this little centrifuge, and then run it through the alkalizer. And we'll get a bunch of details as to where that beer is at, making sure that fermentation is continuing along.
One of the best places to have a beer in the whole brewery is in that little room over there, which runs adjacent to this lab. So anytime Beard puts together a pilot batch of a new brew, something we're working on that might eventually become a wider release, the first kegs of it come here to the lab, and we just have a little tasting room on that side.
Currently on tap, I have something temporarily called Idle Night.
So is this a spin off of the Idle Pilsner? Is that where it stems?
Yes, so
okay.
This is still with that same lager yeast, but with a couple dark malts in there just to create like a black lager. This has a lot of roast character to it. It's pretty rich. I don't know if I want all that roast in it, but it still like finishes nice and dry. Again, same yeast as Idle Days Pills. But yeah, basically every beer that gets brewed on that pilot system when I'm coming through here.
Just tastes super fresh. That's gonna be tastes super fresh. Wow.
So this is a beer that has had a total brewing yield of like less than 6 or 7 6-barrel kegs, you know? So this is really stuff that rarely sees the light of day.
So we can check out packaging if you want.
This is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean the majority of this footprint is going to be filled with our bottle filling line. 48 head filler right here. And then we just recently installed this Cody 5-head can filler last year. So much of the formats have been packaged into cans recently instead of the bottles. So this thing's getting used almost every day, all day. And at the very end of the line, you'll see the kegging line, which you've probably seen a few of. You know, not much more than like a car wash looking type thing. But from here, once it's all packaged, the guys will come in with the forklifts, run it out to the warehouse for the bottle conditioning and the warm cellar, can storage, whatever we got to do. But this is where all the packaging takes place. So. And this room's, you know, clearly air conditioned for the barrel storage. Just trying to keep it around a certain temperature, stable. A lot of these guys in front of me end up being part of the Orphan Barrel program, which could become that Grand Cru or anything for the
One of those
blendery
bottles that we got,
releases.
yeah.
Absolutely, man.
So that concludes the tour through Brewery Ommegang. Big thank you to Justin Forsythe and Matt White on taking us through there. This really was awesome to see, and we hope you enjoyed it too. Make sure to hit that like button and share this with your friends. Like, follow, and subscribe to everything What's on Tap listed in the description below. Cheers.